Today we're back at Brookwood Cemetery in Surrey, and we're here because this cemetery incredibly has 14 recipients of the Victoria Cross, either buried or commemorated right here at Brookwood. So today we are back at Brookwood Cemetery. Now, we've been here before, but we actually focused more on the military cemetery, which is sort of the other side of the huge plot that they have here. Now, today we've come back to have a look around Brookwood because incredibly, Brookwood is a place that has 14 recipients of the Victoria Cross. 12 of those are buried here. This is their final resting place, and a further 2 are commemorated on memorials here. There was actually a 15th, a third one who was commemorated on a memorial here, but not anymore, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the video. Today we're going to take our time walking around the cemetery here. It is huge, so realistically I actually think this is going to be more than one visit that it will take me to make this video, so if I start changing clothes and stuff halfway through, that's why. But we're going to start out walking around and take a look at some of the recipients of the Victoria Cross who are here at Brookwood. We're going to tell their stories. Now, when you come to a huge cemetery like this, I really recommend doing some research before you come. When I say it's huge, I mean from where I parked to where I am stood now, this was a 20-minute walk. And to get to some of the other parts, it's another 20-minute walk. So it's a huge, huge site. And if you're ever going to come here, I really recommend doing some research beforehand. Work out where you want to go, try and find out the plots that the different people that you're hoping to visit are buried or commemorated. I've done a lot of that, and it's certainly helped me, because even when you know you're in the right plot, they're not necessarily immediately easy to find. Anyway, right, let's go and visit our first person here at Brookwood. Okay, so we've just walked out into the middle of the cemetery, and the first grave that we've come to visit is that of a man who received his Victoria Cross for actions during the Great War, a conflict which obviously we're very familiar with on this channel. Now, of course, some of the guys we're going to visit today received their Victoria Cross a lot earlier than that, in the Boer War and things like that. But the first one we're going to visit is actually somebody who received their Victoria Cross for actions during the Great War. Let's go and take a look at his grave just up here. Now, just here is the grave we've come to see. Actually a very good condition grave. It looks like it's been redone or had some renovation work, I would say, recently, more recently than the Great War, I would suggest. Yes. Now, the first grave we've come to visit is this one here. Now, it's actually in lovely condition, so I would guess that this has had some maintenance and stuff to it since it was first put here, which would have been in 1959. But it's in great condition. Now, something important to note, all of these graves at Brookwood have a plaque like this that tells you this is the grave of a Victoria Cross holder, and there's a little QR code where you can scan it and get some more information. So if you just want to come here and have a visit and look around, you can scan this and you can get the information, which is really fantastic. But we've come to talk about this man here. This is the Reverend William Robert Fountaine Addison VC. He died in 1962, but he was awarded his Victoria Cross for actions in 1916. On the outbreak of war, William Robert Fountaine Addison volunteered for the Army's Chaplains Department, and he was posted to the 13th Division in Mesopotamia, it's modern-day Iraq. He served as a chaplain of the force's 4th class, and he was awarded his VC for actions on the 9th of April 1916. His citation reads, "For most conspicuous bravery, he carried a wounded man to the cover of a trench and assisted several others to the same cover, after binding up their wounds under heavy rifle and machine gun fire. In addition to these unaided efforts, by his splendid example and utter disregard of personal danger, he encouraged the stretcher bearers to go forwards under heavy fire and collect the wounded." Reverend Addison was invested with the VC by King George V at Buckingham Palace on the 3rd of August 1917. Reverend Addison passed away in 1962 in St Leonards-on-Sea, not too far from here in Sussex, and was buried here with his wife at Brookwood Cemetery. Right, let's move on to the next person that we've come to visit. Now, the second person we've come to visit is also somebody who was awarded the Victoria Cross for actions during the Great War. We've come to visit Cyril Hubert Frisby. So here we have a family grave, originally of Audrey Frisby, who was the wife of Cyril Hubert Frisby. She passed away in 1960, and a year later in 1961 is when Cyril Hubert Frisby VC passed away. Now, during the Great War, he was a member of the 1st Battalion of the Coldstream Guards, and he was awarded his Victoria Cross for actions on the 27th of September 1918. His citation reads, "Captain Frisby was in command of a company detailed to capture a canal crossing, but when the canal was reached, the leading platoon came under annihilating fire from a strong enemy post under the bridge on the far side of the canal." Captain Frisby, with Lance Corporal Thomas Norman Jackson, who was also awarded the VC, and 2 others climbed down into the canal under the intense fire and succeeded in capturing the post with 2 machine guns and 12 men. Then, having consolidated his objective, he gave timely support to a company which had lost all of its officers and sergeants, organising the defences and beating off a heavy counterattack. Unlike many recipients of the Victoria Cross, Cyril Hubert Frisby was able to come back to a life of peace under the war. He spent much of his time tuna fishing, and he died at his home in Guildford, Surrey, not far from here, at the age of 75 on the 10th of September 1961. And he now lays here with his wife in this grave at Brookwood Cemetery. Okay, so we have just arrived at the Martineau family grave at Brookwood. But as you can hear, there are plentiful people around me with power tools, so we're going to switch over to voiceover Rob. So this is the family grave of the Martineau family. Horace Robert is actually named on the right-hand side of the memorial here, which we'll look at in the video in just a second. He was born in Bayswater, London in 1874, and later in his life in 1896, he was serving under Colonel Sir Robert Baden-Powell in the successful campaign against the Matabele. He later joined the Cape Police, and on the outbreak of the Boer War in 1899, he joined the Protectorate Regiment, the Northwest Cape Colony, where he served in the South African campaign from 1899 to 1902, taking part in the defence at Mafeking. Martineau was awarded his VC for actions near Mafeking on the 26th of December 1899, and his citation for that action reads, "On the 26th of December 1899, during the fight at Game Tree near Mafeking, when the order to retire had been given, Sergeant Martineau stopped and picked up Corporal Lecamp, who had been struck down about 10 yards from the Boer trenches, and half dragged, half carried him towards a bush about 150 yards from the trenches. In doing this, Sergeant Martineau was wounded in the side, but paid no attention to it, and proceeded to stanch and bandage the wounds of his comrade, who he afterwards assisted to retire. The firing whilst they were retiring was very heavy, and Sergeant Martineau was again wounded. When shot the second time, he was absolutely exhausted from supporting his comrade and sunk down, unable to proceed further. He received 3 wounds, one of which necessitated the amputation of his arm near the shoulder. Martineau was invested with his Victoria Cross in South Africa by Lord Roberts in Cape Town in 1900. He took no further part in the war, I imagine largely due to the fact he had to have his arm amputated. And while serving in Gallipoli, he fell ill with a fever. And unfortunately that was going to be the end of his time. He died from the results of the fever on the 7th of April 1916, aged only 41 years old. Now he's actually buried in the Andersons Bay Cemetery in Dunedin, but he's also commemorated here on the family grave of Brookwood. Okay, so the fourth person who we have come to see is Ross Lois Mangles, and you'll see that he is here. This is not a grave just of him. We also have Henrietta Anne Mangles, who was the widow of Ross Mangles, and you can see on the grave there we have the VC next to his name, and you'll note underneath it says late Bengal Civil Service. Well, Ross Mangles actually was born in Calcutta, India, and he joined the Bengal Civil Service in 1853, and he served as an assistant magistrate. Now, at the time, there was some uprisings in India, and there was part of a a siege called the Siege of Ara, and it was sort of fairly kind of small scale in itself, but it was one of the larger actions of the Indian Mutiny, and the tiny garrison there managed to hold out against a huge number of rebels who were trying to take that area. They were relieved on the 2nd of August 1857, and during that time there was a kind of a heavy amount of fighting around a sort of relief attempt on the 29th to 30th of July 1857. Now, the recommendation by Sir James Outram for why Ross Mangles should be awarded a Victoria Cross reads as: Mr. Mangles volunteered and served with the force consisting of detachments of Her Majesty's 10th and 37th Regiments and some native troops, dispatched to the relief of Ara. In July 1857, under the command of Captain Dunbar of the 10th Regiment, the force fell into an ambush on the night of the 28th of July 1857, and during the retreat on the next morning, Mr. Mangles, with signal gallantry and generous self-devotion, and notwithstanding that he himself had been previously wounded, carried for several miles out of action a wounded soldier of Her Majesty's 37th Regiment. After binding his wounds under a murderous fire which killed and wounded almost the whole detachment, and he bore him in safety to the boats. And for that action, Ross Mangles was awarded the Victoria Cross. Now, he was actually on sick leave in England in September 1958, and a couple of years later in 1860 he was actually awarded his Victoria Cross by Queen Victoria at Windsor Castle. Ross Mangles died in Pirbright, Surrey, not far from here, in February 1905, and he was buried here at Brookwood, the fourth of our Victoria Cross recipients that we're going to be seeing here at Brookwood today. Now, the next man we've come to visit is another recipient of the Victoria Cross from the Great War, and he actually received his award for actions over a period of time. It was the 21st to the 25th of August, then also the 4th of September for actions in Longest Wood, France, and that is Daniel Marcus Beek. It's also a little bit different because actually we don't have a grave to visit. The exact location of Beek's grave is unknown, but it's known that he is buried somewhere in plots 20 and 21 here at Brookwood, and I'm stood between 20 and 21 right now, so it could be that he rests somewhere immediately close to us, or it could be that it's on the other side of the plot, a little bit further away from us here. It's believed that he requested no grave marker, so it's not like his grave was there and then lost. It's believed that he was actually buried and had requested no grave marker, and that's why we don't have a grave to visit. But nonetheless, we're going to tell his story and read his citation that led to him being awarded the Victoria Cross in 1918. So out here somewhere ahead of us, we have the grave of Daniel Beek. He was born in 1891 in Southampton, and he joined the Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve in 1915. He achieved the rank of commander, and he served in Gallipoli, and it was during his time in the Great War that the event happened for which he would receive the Victoria Cross. Now, it was during a period of time, 21st to the 25th of August and 4th of September 1918, and his citation reads: He led his men and captured 4 enemy positions under heavy fire. 4 days later, although dazed by a shell fragment and in the absence of the brigade commander, he reorganised the whole brigade under heavy gunfire and led his men to their objective. When the attack was held up, he, accompanied by only one runner, succeeded in breaking up a nest of machine guns, taking 10 prisoners. His initiative and confidence, with which he inspired all ranks, contributed very materially to the success of these operations. Now, Beek went on to serve in France in the Second World War in 1940 as Brigadier Acting Major General and subsequently General Officer commanding troops in Malta. In 1942, he retired from service, and in 1945, he was honoured with the Freedom of Southampton. Now, after the wars, or after both wars, Beek was very modest, and in fact he wrote a letter to his old headmaster, which read, "I can only say I feel very undeserving of such an award, and my one regret is that it was not given to my battalion as a fitting acknowledgement of the magnificent deeds performed by those splendid men. But it has been my privilege to command, rather than to me personally." Major General Beek passed away in 1967 in Swindon, and he was buried here in Brookwood in an unmarked grave. Now, whilst we don't have a grave to visit here, he does actually have a memorial plaque dedicated to him at the Cheltenham War Memorial, but we know he is buried somewhere in this area. A great man who served in 2 world wars and was the recipient of the Victoria Cross. Right, let's move on and visit our next person here at Brookwood. So the next grave that we've come to is that of Lieutenant Colonel John Sherwood Kelly. And like the other graves, we've got the plaque here. So if you are visiting here yourself, you can scan the QR code and read some of the information that I'm going to share with you now. So again, it's another lovely grave actually, and certainly I'm assuming it's had some restoration work. In fact, I'll see if I can see that here. Lieutenant Colonel John Sherwood Kelly, VC. Now, he actually was awarded his VC for actions during the Great War in 1917. Prior to that, though, he did serve in the Second Boer War. He was born in 1880 in Queenstown, Cape Province, South Africa. And during the Great War, he joined the Norfolk Regiment as acting lieutenant colonel, and he was command of a battalion in the Royal Inexcusing Fusiliers. On the 20th of November 1917 in France, he was awarded his VC for actions when a party of men were held up on the near side of a canal by heavy rifle fire. Lieutenant Colonel Kelly ordered covering fire and personally led his company across the canal. Under heavy fire and high ground held by the enemy, he took a Lewis gun team, forced his way through obstacles and covered the advance of his battalion, enabling them to capture their position. Later, he led a charge against some pits, again under heavy fire, which captured 5 enemy machine guns and 46 prisoners. For those actions, he was awarded the Victoria Cross. Later in 1919, when he was commanding the 2nd Hampshire Regiment in North Russia, he wrote to a friend, and in that letter he was quite critical of the British forces. That was found out that he'd done that, and the letter was discovered, and he was actually court-martialed. He pleaded guilty and he was severely reprimanded. 2 weeks later, he was actually relinquished of his commission. He died on the 18th of August 1931 in a nursing home in Kensington, London. He suffered complications after a bout of malaria. Now, 2 things about the grave which I found quite interesting here. First of all, I really like the kind of wording on the grave here. One who never turned his back but marched breast forward. Now, something interesting which I've noticed here is this actually suggests that he died on the 18th of August 1951 and saying that he was aged 51. Now, I believe, and I've looked at it after I saw this, I'm pretty sure he passed away in 1931. It was the 18th of August, but 1931. Now, bearing in mind, he was born in 1880. If he did die in 1951, that would make him 71, not 51. So that's interesting. I believe that is incorrect, what's on here, but I will have to have a look into that, or maybe somebody watching this will know a bit more about that and can help us out in the comments, but I will try to find out myself. Well, that's interesting. That threw me off a little bit reading that. I thought maybe I'd got some stuff wrong in my research, but no, I'm pretty sure Lieutenant Colonel Kelly passed away in 1931. So I'll have to try and find out about that. Now, the next grave we're visiting is actually just a few yards over in this direction. We're over on the far side of Brookwood Cemetery now, for anybody who sort of, you know, is interested in kind of how this is set up. As I said, it's a huge area. So from where I've parked to here is probably like a half-hour walk, something like that total. So a bit of a trek back when we're finished, but it's all right. We're pressing on. Really finding this fascinating. So many stories of Victoria Cross recipients in the same cemetery. Right, let's head over to the next spot. Okay, so we've just come over to plot 84 of Brookwood Cemetery to see this family grave of the Hallows family. Now, this is a man who actually isn't buried here, but he is commemorated on this grave. So this is a commemoration of 2nd Lieutenant Rufus Price Hallows. He was the recipient of the Victoria Cross and also the Military Cross. And in fact, he received his Victoria Cross for actions at Sanctuary Wood in Ypres, an area that we are familiar with. We visited during a video not long ago. And he was awarded that for his actions in 1915. So his citation reads, for most conspicuous bravery and devotion to duty during the fighting at Hoog between the 25th of September and the 1st of October 1915, 2nd Lieutenant Hallows displayed throughout these days the greatest bravery and untiring energy, and set a magnificent example to his men during 4 heavy and prolonged bombardments. On more than one occasion, he climbed up onto the parapet, utterly regardless of danger, in order to put fresh heart into his men. He made daring reconnaissances of the German positions in our lines. When the supply of bombs was running short, he went back under heavy shell fire and brought up a fresh supply. Even after he was mortally wounded, he continued to cheer those around him and to inspire them with fresh courage. Wow, it's the story of a brave man who was killed in that action in September 1915. He is buried in the Ypres salient. He's buried at Bedford House Cemetery. So I haven't actually been to his grave, I don't believe, but I will try to at some point in the future. But he is commemorated here on this grave. So this is the Hallows family grave. So we have here beloved memory of Frederick Blackwood Hallows of Red Hill, Surrey. He entered into rest, it says here, on the 14th of November 1896, and of Mary Ann Taylor Hallows, his widow, who entered into rest January 25th, 1941. Well, she was 98 years old. And on the side here, now it's quite worn, unfortunately, so you can't see it too well, but here it does say, and in memory of Rupert Price Hallows, which is written here, and it then explains he was killed in action in Ypres in 1915. Now, from what I've read, I don't think Rupert Hallows was killed immediately in that action, but I believe he died shortly after of the wounds that he had sustained. So he is buried at that Bedford House Cemetery near Zillibeek in the Ypres salient, but commemorated here at Brookwood on the family grave. One of the stories of a Victoria Cross recipient, like so many of them, who didn't survive the action for which they were awarded the medal. Of course, with great bravery comes great risk, and Rupert Hallows was somebody who became victim of that. Right, let's move on to our next one. We've still got a few to go. Okay, so we've come to our next grave, and this is another family grave. Now, when you look at this, immediately on the top here, we see the name of Surgeon Major General James Inkson, who died in 1898. Now, that's actually not the man that we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about his son, who is also named here on the grave, and that is Colonel Edgar Thomas Inkson, VC DSO, son of the above, as you can see, and he died on the 19th of February 1947. So Edgar Thomas Inkson served in South Africa, and he was awarded his Victoria Cross for actions on the 24th of February 1900. He joined the Royal Army Medical Corps as a lieutenant in 1899, and he served in South Africa as a regimental medical officer with 3 batteries of the Royal Field Artillery. On the 24th of February 1900, he was at the Battle of Colenso, and that's when he was awarded his VC for his bravery in carrying 2nd Lieutenant Devonish, who was seriously wounded and unable to walk. He carried him for several hundred yards under heavy fire to a place of safety, and the ground that he had to move across was exposed to heavy fire. He also served in the Great War, and during that time he was awarded the DSO, that's Distinguished Service Order, for actions in 1917. He passed away at 74 years old in 1947, and he is here at the family Inkson grave at Brookwood Cemetery. Now I've just spotted the next grave we're headed for. We're going to just negotiate this ditch, and we are over here again. We can see the Victoria Cross holder sign which helped us. We're coming up to the grave of Major Matthew Fontaine Maori Micklejohn VC, and you can see here his grave. Now he died in 1913, and he was only 42 years old, and we're actually going to be telling the story here of an act of bravery in war, but also afterwards as well. So Micklejohn won his VC for actions during the South African Boer War in 1899, and this was during the battle of, and I'm going to say this badly wrong, my Dutch friends will ruin me for this, but the Battle of Elandslaat, I think it might be, and on the 22nd of October 1899. His citation reads, "After the main Boer position had been captured, some of the men of the Gordon Highlanders, when about to advance, were exposed to a heavy crossfire. Having lost their leaders, commenced to waver. Seeing this, Captain Micklejohn rushed to the front and called on the Gordons to follow him. By his conspicuous bravery and fearless example, he rallied the men and led them against the enemy's position, where he fell, desperately wounded in 4 places." Now, he actually survived those wounds, although he did have to have his right arm amputated as a result of them. He did, however, become a very efficient staff officer after that, and he moved to the War Office in 1909, working in the department as the Director of Military Training, and he later achieved the rank of Major. Now, he actually died on the 4th of July 1913 in another act of bravery. Now, in 1913, Micklejohn was actually riding a horse as part of a kind of a parade. During that time, the horse he was riding was startled, and it bolted with him on the back of the horse. It was charging towards a group of children, and so he actually deliberately managed to pull the reins of the horse to turn it into the railings at Rotten Row. He was seriously wounded during that, and in fact, he never regained consciousness. An act of bravery outside of war that actually led to his death in 1913. And he is buried here at Brookwood Cemetery, along with many other recipients of the Victoria Cross, as we've discovered today. Right, let's carry on. We've still got another few to go and visit. So I mentioned how many Victoria Cross recipients there are in this cemetery, and some of them are very close together. So we've just been over there by that tree in the centre of the frame. That's where Micklejohn's grave is, and we're just coming just next to it over here to the grave of Colonel Edmund Baron Hartley VC. Now this is his grave here as a senior medical officer, the mounted rifleman. So born in Ivybridge, Devon, Edmund Baron Hartley VC served in the Basuto War as a surgeon major with the Cape Mounted Riflemen of the South African forces. He was awarded his VC for actions in the Mwazori Mountain in Basutoland on the 5th of June 1879, and his citation reads, on the 5th of June 1879 in South Africa, Surgeon Major Hartley attended the wounded under fire at the unsuccessful attack at Masuri Mountain. From an exposed position on open ground, he carried in his arms a wounded corporal of the Cape Mounted Riflemen. The Surgeon Major then returned under severe enemy fire in order to dress the wounds of other men of the storming party. So a serious act of bravery that led him to be awarded the Victoria Cross. Hartley was later promoted to a surgeon colonel, and he also served during the Second South African War. He's rested here at Brookwood Cemetery. He passed away at his home in Ash in Surrey, not too far from here. And his Victoria Cross and his other medals actually are displayed at the Army Medical Services Museum, not far from here at all in Mitchett, Surrey. Right, with these last two graves being close together, our next one is actually just over on the other side here. So let's just move across to that part of the cemetery. So again, all fairly close together. We've just been over this side here and we've come over here. So this is the grave of Wallace Duffield Wright. He passed away in 1953, but he was awarded the Victoria Cross for actions in February 1903. So Wallace Duffield Wright was actually born in September 1875 in Gibraltar, but he went to school over here in England, in Kent, and he joined the militia in 1893. In 1896, he was commissioned into the 1st Battalion of the Queen's Royal Regiment, and he served with the Malakand Field Force and Tyra Expeditionary Force, and he was promoted to lieutenant. In 1903, he was promoted to captain, and in that same year he was awarded the Victoria Cross for an act of bravery that happened on the 24th of March 1903 with the Kano Sokoto expedition in northern Nigeria. And on the 24th of March, with only one officer and 44 men, he took up a position in path of the advancing enemy and sustained determined charges of 1,000 to 2,000 foot, this reads, foot for 2 hours. When the enemy, after heavy losses, fell back in good order, Lieutenant Wright continued to follow them till they were in full retreat. The personal example of this officer, as well as his skillful leadership, contributed largely to the brilliant success of the affair. He in no way infringed his order by his daring initiative, although waning of the possibility of meeting large bodies of the enemy. An act of bravery in 1903. Lieutenant Wright went on to live after that by quite a distance, and he actually passed away in Chobham, Surrey, not far from here, in 1953, and he's buried here at Brookwood. So a fascinating day so far here exploring Brookwood. Now, believe it or not, this has been a long day. From when I started filming this video to now has been about 4 hours where I've been walking around, but I've really enjoyed it. It's been fascinating. Unfortunately, though, it does mean that I can't get to all of the graves today. So next thing you're going to see in a minute is going to be Future Rob. Anyone who's familiar with Brookwood, it's kind of split into two bits. You have this side here, and then on the other side of the main road, you have the rest of the cemetery and also the military cemetery over there as well. So we're going to head over to that side to finish off the video. So the next thing you're going to see is going to be Future Rob, probably going to be wearing different clothes, hopefully on a day as nice as this, so that we can carry on the video. Right, let's go. So it's a new day, and in fact we're about 10 days later from when you guys saw that last piece of filming. You can see different clothes, less beard, all sorts going on. But we've come back to Brookwood to finish off this fascinating video. We've got another, I think 4 recipients of the Victoria Cross that we're going to be talking about still to go in this video. And to start with, we've come, so we're almost the opposite side of the cemetery from where you last saw me. And as I mentioned, Brookwood is huge, so quite a walk across here. I mean, I drove to the other side today and I've walked in from the other side, so I haven't done the entire walk. It's very possible though to do it. First of all, we're going to go visit the grave of William Reynolds VC to tell his story here today. So here we have the grave of Private William Reynolds VC of the Scottish Fusilier Guards, Scots Guards. Born in 1827 in Edinburgh, he died in 1869, aged 42 in London. But he was awarded his Victoria Cross for actions in the Crimean Peninsula in 1854. He was a guardsman in number 4 Company, supporting the Scots Fusilier Guards colour party at the Battle of Alma in September 1854. The battle was his first major engagement of the Crimean War, and he was awarded the medal for a significant role in rallying the troops and ensuring that they fought on despite being under heavy fire at the time. The citation for his actions reads, Scots Fusilier Guards number 3368, Private William Reynolds, when the formation of the line was disordered at Alma, for having behaved in a conspicuous manner in rallying men around the colours. He received his Victoria Cross by Queen Victoria in Hyde Park on the 26th of June 1857. After leaving the army, he lived in London and he worked as a bank messenger. And as we said, he died in 1869, aged 42, in central London. He was buried here at Brookwood in Surrey, another one of the many recipients of the Victoria Cross here at Brookwood. Right, let's move on to our next spot. Now, before we head to our final spot on this tour around Brookwood, I actually just wanted to take a moment to talk about one additional recipient of the Victoria Cross who was previously commemorated here at Brookwood, but actually isn't anymore, and that is Samuel George Pearse. Now, we're not anywhere in the cemetery that specifically relates to Sergeant Samuel George Pearse, but I thought we would tell his story. So he was born in Penarth, Glamorganshire. He was educated in the Penarth Grammar School, and in 1911 his family moved to Australia, where he joined the Legion of Frontiersmen. He served in Gallipoli and then in France during the Great War, and was discharged in 1919. Following that, he joined the North Russia Relief Force, the 45th Battalion of the Royal Fusiliers, and he was involved in fighting in August of that year, which led to him being awarded the Victoria Cross. So his citation for that reads, for most conspicuous bravery, devotion, duty to self-sacrifice during the operation against the enemy battery position north of Empsta, which is in northern Russia. On the 29th of August 1919, Sergeant Pearse cut through enemy barbed wire under heavy machine gun fire and rifle fire and cleared a way for the troops to enter an enemy battery position. Seeing that a blockhouse was harassing our advance and causing us casualties, he charged the blockhouse single-handed, killing the occupants with bombs. This gallant non-commissioned officer met with his death a minute later, and it was due to him that the position was carried with so few casualties. His magnificent bravery and utter disregard for personal danger won him the admiration of all troops. Sergeant Pearse is actually buried in North Russia at the Archangel Allied Cemetery. Sergeant Pearse was actually commemorated here at Brookwood on a Russian memorial. That has, at some point in the last few years, been removed from Brookwood, so he isn't commemorated here anymore. But he was at one point, and so I thought his story was going to be interesting to tell. I'll be honest, and perhaps a shortfall of myself, I haven't actually researched too much on the detail around why that memorial was removed. I don't know if it's the Russian link to that, I'm not sure, but it has since been removed from Brookwood. But he was commemorated here. Right, let's head over to our last spot, where we're going to go and see a couple more recipients of the Victoria Cross here at Brookwood. Okay, so for our final spot making this video here at Brookwood of these fascinating graves of the Victoria Cross recipients, we've come over here to kind of the other side of the cemetery from where we started our video. And the reason I've ended up finishing here is because we're actually at the site of the headstones of 2 Victoria Cross recipients that sit here side by side at Brookwood. Okay, so here we have the 2 headstones of these 2 men who were recipients of the Victoria Cross. You can see we've got the 2 panels here in the front, which enable us to scan those QR codes and learn a bit more about these men. But here on the right-hand side, we have James Hollowell, VC. And here on the left, we have William Kenny, VC. Let's tell a little bit more about their stories. Okay, so let's start off here with the grave of James Hollowell. So James Hollowell, born in 1823 and died in 1876. And as you can actually see here on the headstone, he was awarded the Victoria Cross during the relief of Lucknow on the 26th of September 1857. So during the Indian Mutiny, during the siege of Lucknow, James Hollowell was part of the group sent to relieve that city, and his citation reads, "The 78th Regiment, Private James Hollowell, a party on the 26th of September 1875, was shut up and besieged in a house in the city of Lucknow by the rebel sepoys. Private James Hollowell, one of the party, behaved throughout the day in the most admirable manner. He directed, encouraged and led others, exposing himself fearlessly, and by his talent in persuading and cheering, prevailing on 9 dispirited men to make a successful defence in a burning house, with the enemy firing through 4 windows." Wow. Now you can see he was a private in the 78th Regiment of Foot, which later became the Seaforth Highlanders. Now he actually later after this particular action, he achieved the rank, I should say, of Lance Corporal, and he actually died in Holborn on the 4th of April 1876. He was buried here at Brookwood in an unmarked grave, and this headstone here was erected, and you can see actually down the bottom, the Seaforth Highlanders Regimental Association. Wow. Right, let's tell the story of our other VC recipient who rests right here. So here we have the headstone of William Kenny VC of the Gordon Highlanders. Now you can see on the gravestone here, he died on the 10th of January 1936, aged 55, and he was awarded his Victoria Cross for actions in the First World War, just near Ypres on the 23rd of October 1914. So William actually served in the Boer War prior to the Great War, and then later went on to serve as a member of the Gordon Highlanders during the First World War. On the 23rd of October 1914, he was serving as a drummer in the 2nd Battalion of the Gordon Highlanders, and his actions led to him being awarded the Victoria Cross. His citation for that action reads, "For conspicuous bravery on the 23rd of October near Ypres, in rescuing wounded men on 5 occasions under heavy fire in the most fearless manner, and for twice previously saving machine guns by carrying them out of action. On numerous occasions, Drummer Kenny conveyed urgent messages under very dangerous circumstances under fire-swept ground." Now, William Kenny actually survived the war and was discharged in 1919. He passed away in hospital in Charing Cross in 1936, and he was buried at the time. Now, you might notice on the top of this gravestone, it says buried near this spot. Because although William Kenny was buried in 1936, his original grave marker, which was very likely made of wood, was actually lost. And so this headstone here was erected in 1998 by members of the Gordon Highlanders. And you can see he rests here just next to a fellow Victoria Cross recipient. So there we go, that brings to a close our video taking a look around Brookwood at so many graves of the recipients of the Victoria Cross, so many here in one cemetery. I found this interesting, and I found this to be a really good 2 days walking this ground. Of course, the sad stories, but also fascinating stories, and just walking this cemetery over the course of the 2 days, visiting some of these graves and telling some of the stories and learning those stories myself, I really found interesting, and I hope you guys enjoyed it too. If you did, do me a favour, do all the YouTube stuff right here on the screen. I felt that here at the place where we have 2 recipients of the Victoria Cross resting right next to each other, I felt this was the best place to round off this video. I'm actually heading just further along the cemetery here to the fascinating American cemetery that's here at Brookwood. You're going to see that in the next video, so I recommend sticking around for that one. In the meantime, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video.